Well, everyone, good morning, or good afternoon now. Welcome to City Hall, the People's Palace. San Francisco's always been proud to be a city that is leading the nation and perhaps the world in the challenge to foster equality, acceptance, and tolerance for all of our people. And we're a city that celebrates diversity every day as part of our lives. Well, our city is headed in the right direction. Our economy is in a robust and recovering status. Jobs and investor confidence are at an all-time high, and our residents are getting back to work at great numbers. We're making this city a city for the 100% where no one is left behind. And our city budget, our city's roadmap, is where we are investing in our people and protecting our values and, of course, our most vulnerable. And together with the Board of Supervisors, we are making sure San Francisco has the strongest social safety net for our most vulnerable, and including those residents that are living with HIV and AIDS who need housing and treatment. Well, most importantly, we need to continue to lift our residents up and make sure everyone shares in the success of our city. It is here in San Francisco we are once again changing the world and changing how people every day think about committed, loving relationships and the definition of marriage. Well, we took that march forward towards marriage equality with what started with then Mayor Gavin Newsom and our city attorney back in 2004. We took one of the most important civil rights issues of our generations to the highest court in our nation, and we won. And I still remember vividly that day, just as we talked a minute ago, right here on this spot at City Hall, where Chris Perry and Sandy Steyer were the first couple in California to marry. Thank you to Chad Griffin, who helped to build the case against Proposition 8 to win against marriage discrimination in the case in California. Well, now we are more than halfway there, 37 states and the District of Columbia. We have momentum going, and we won't stop until we reach 50 states, and every loving couple in America can be married. Congratulations also to the people of Ireland for moving our world in the right direction. We'll never relent on our focus to ensure equality is for everyone across our nation and across the world. In March of this year, I directed our city departments to bar any publicly funded city employees travel to the state of Indiana in order to stand united in San Francisco as San Franciscans to condemn Indiana's new discriminatory law and protect the civil rights of all Americans. We've come a long way, but we know that we have to do more. And now, as we eagerly await the ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court, we thank Jim Obergefell for his courage to be the plaintiff in this case that will have historic consequences. Jim, your bravery, your courage, and your willingness to take a stand against injustice is an example not only to the LGBT community, but to every single American who values equality and fairness. No wonder the vast majority of Americans support marriage equality. No wonder more and more Americans are in favor of non-discrimination protections that ensure that no LGBT person is subject to life-threatening discrimination at home, at work, at school, or in any public space. We in the city of San Francisco, we have been on the right side of history, and San Francisco will always push the envelope to expand the table to make room for everyone. There is always room for equality. And San Francisco will always lead the way in the LGBT movement as we are a city committed to equality for all. We've come a long way together, equality without exception, and we have much to celebrate during this Pride Month. but we still have a way to go. And we'll continue to change hearts and minds here and around the world. And again, I want to thank the Human Rights Campaign for your commitment to equality and making sure that we as a country do the right thing. I want to thank all the people here, our supervisors, our former supervisors as well, for being here, our city attorney for being here, of course, Jim and Chad. And they'll go into much more detail as we approach this significant historic day with our U.S. Supreme Court. I'd like to invite up here the Executive Director of our Human Rights Campaign, Chad Griffin.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor Lee, for your incredible leadership, not just for the citizens of this great city, but also establishing this city and your leadership as a model for the country when it comes to equality and social justice. So thank you. I have to tell you, it's quite humbling to be standing up here with these incredible leaders, many of whom I consider heroes, and many of whom are giants from shoulders that we all stand in the progress that we've seen today. And Mayor Lee and some of us were talking earlier, it seems like just yesterday that we were all here in this very space watching that incredible moment as Chris and Sandy, with one of their sons standing by their side, were able to finally, after years of fighting for that right, to marry the person they love. Now, today, we are here as the Supreme Court, once again, just a matter of weeks or perhaps days, is truly entering another moment of history. And I think it's important at a time like this to think about what got us to this moment. What did it take to get here? Decades upon decades of advocates sacrificing, elected leaders standing up and boldly helping to lead the way, everyday folks fighting for their rights and standing up, plaintiffs, lawyers. But if we just stop there, I think we would be missing a really incredible point, and I think in some ways the magic to the success of this movement. And it's fitting that we stand here today just across from the bust of another great leader, someone who early on was leading the way and blazing trails, and that's Harvey Milk. Now, Harvey taught us a lot of things, but if there's one thing that has proven to be true and critical to the success of this movement, it's when he called upon all of us to stand up and to come out of the closet. He said, come out wherever you are, at home, at school, in your own communities. Because he knew then that's what would ultimately change hearts and minds. And in those decades since, Americans of all stripes all across this country have stood up boldly, many risking their own livelihoods, facing rejection from their families or the workplace, in their own communities at church. They blazed the trail for everyone to be able to stand up and fight this fight, and for us to be able to march up those steps to the Supreme Court, as Jim just did a couple of months ago and will do again as he awaits that decision. So we are where we are because of so many great leaders who helped blaze the trail. But we also are where we are because of everyday folks that risked so much. Now, at a moment like this, I think Harvey Milk, and I talked to Cleve a little bit about this last night, he would also say at a moment that we're approaching, and I believe for those reasons I just stated, we will ultimately win a victory that brings marriage equality to all 50 states in this country. But Harvey would say at a moment like that, perhaps we get a very brief moment to celebrate. Just a moment, maybe a minute or two. But our job, all of our jobs, is to look at what's next, what's beyond marriage. He would say, what about that young person in Altoona, Pennsylvania, or Hope, Arkansas, or that couple in Mississippi, Alabama, throughout the Midwest, throughout the Deep South, who even with a 50-state marriage victory, on the very day that's realized, in the majority of states in this country, that couple who gets married at 10 a.m. can be fired by noon and evicted from their homes by 2, all on the very same day. Simply because in this country we still have no explicit non-discrimination protections in federal law. Now, once again, this city has led the way, this state has led the way, and some have followed. But at the end of the day, what we must do is fight for full and complete federal equality under our laws. It does not exist today. And that's why the Human Rights Campaign and all of our coalition partners in this session of Congress will lead the way for a fully comprehensive non-discrimination bill, an equality act that will provide non-discrimination protections on the basis of employment and housing and federal funding, education, credit, and so many of the needed protections. It will truly be perhaps the biggest fight in our movement's history. But it's a fight that we must win. It's a fight that we must win in order to bring those needed protections to all Americans. And I also think, and as my friend Cleve often reminds me and nudges me and holds me accountable on a daily basis, I think Harvey would suggest we should have a little lack of patience and a sense of urgency in this fight, right? He would say, stand up, demand your rights, fight for them, and we will win. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to approach it with a sense of urgency, and we're going to come out of this marriage victory with great excitement, incredible enthusiasm, and just as couples here in this state are enjoying the right to marry the person they love, soon I believe folks all across this country in all 50 states will. And let me tell you, that moment would not be here today were it not for so many, but especially were it not for Jim Obergefell. Jim is the named plaintiff in the marriage cases that are before the Supreme Court today. Jim is someone who stood up, Jim is someone who spoke out, and Jim is someone who has changed countless hearts and minds in his own state of Ohio, but all across this country and increasingly around the world. He is a dear friend, he is a hero, and we are all grateful for his leadership. It's now my great pleasure to bring to the podium Jim Obergefell.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Mayor Lee. It's really an honor for me to be standing in this historic place and in this city that has done so much in our fight for equality. So when my husband John died, I never thought I'd have to fight all the way to the United States Supreme Court to defend our marriage. If I hadn't started that fight, however, I'm not sure I would have realized that the battle will continue even after the ruling is issued later this month. Let me explain. For the more than 20 years we were together, I promised to love, honor, and protect my partner John. But until a few short years ago, we never expected to say I do, and to have those words and promises carry any legal weight. Two things changed, though. The first was the Windsor decision by the Supreme Court in 2013 that struck down part of the Defense of Marriage Act. The second was John's rapidly advancing case of ALS. I realized that there was no better way for me to keep my promises to him, to protect the man I love, the man I'd cared for 24 hours a day, than to get married. And there isn't a better way for me to honor my late husband than to stand here today in front of you and tell our story. You see, still to this day, John and I would not be able to get married in our home state of Ohio. No, we had to charter a medical jet through the help of our family and friends and get married on an airport tarmac in Maryland. At the time, Maryland was one of the few states with marriage equality. After we married, we decided to file suit against the state of Ohio to demand recognition of our lawful marriage on John's death certificate. We won, and when John died, our marriage was recognized on his death certificate. 2 months later, the state of Ohio appealed. To this day, my home state wants nothing more than to erase our 20-year relationship, to erase our marriage, and prevent me from being memorialized alongside the man I loved in his family cemetery plot. That's why I'm proud to stand here today with the Human Rights Campaign and so many others and join with every LGBT American to demand my rights. That's why I'm proud to join with so many plaintiffs across the country to say to the Supreme Court of the United States, my love can't wait anymore. What I've also learned along the way is that marriage isn't the end of our battle for equality. Far from it. In a way, John and I were lucky. We weren't kicked out of our homes. Our families never tried to fix us. We never lost a job because of who we are. We never hid our relationship out of fear. We were never denied service in a business, and we were never physically attacked for the way we were born. There are far too many who can't say that. Matthew Shepard couldn't say that. Leila Elkhorn and Islan Nettles, both victims of the anti-transgender violence that continues to claim life after life after life, couldn't say that. Harvey Milk couldn't say that. And to this day, there is still no federal law that says LGBT people cannot be discriminated against in employment, in housing, in public places. Today, I'm here to make a promise, and it's a promise as sacred as the one I made to John on that airport tarmac. I promise to keep up the fight for the LGBT community until full equality is truly a reality. I promise to work with HRC and our community for a fully inclusive, comprehensive LGBT non-discrimination bill. Until that day comes, we are leaving far too many people behind. I fight for my husband, John. I fight for Leila Elkhorn and Islan Nettles. I fight for Harvey Milk and for the millions of LGBT Americans who have gone before me and those who will follow in our footsteps. I fight for an end to discrimination. Nothing more and nothing less. And here in San Francisco, I fight for an America that lives up to its promise of liberty and justice for all. And I look forward to the day those 4 words above the Supreme Court door truly apply: equal justice under law. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I've often said I don't know how even one of our opponents, I don't care who they are, could sit across from this man and hear his story and suggest anything other than what he deserves is that simple, very simple right that he and so many others have been fighting for. So thank you again, Jim. It's now my honor and pleasure to introduce someone who truly needs no introduction in this city, San Francisco City Attorney Dennis Herrera, who's someone who is a great leader, and on these issues, and in marriage in particular, has really been a trailblazer. He's someone who was working on the issues of marriage equality and the fight for marriage long before I came to this battle. And after Proposition 8 passed here in California, Dennis and I had gotten to know one another through that battle as we had worked to oppose it. And as we moved forward in the idea of a federal case challenging Proposition 8, Dennis and I really saw eye to eye, formed a great partnership, and as so many of you know, Prop 8 is today gone, and it's in large part because of the leadership of this city and the leadership of Dennis and his office fighting side by side as we march to the Supreme Court to take down Prop 8. Dennis Herrera.
Thank you, Chad. Chad also didn't do it all justice. It wasn't just a partnership, it is an incredible friendship. And let me just say that he minimizes his own role in terms of that battle that we all fought collectively to strike down Proposition 8. We wouldn't be here today on the cusp of a great victory if it wasn't for the leadership of Chad Griffin. So Chad, thank you on behalf of all of us for your continuing leadership at the HRC. And there is no one that is a more true warrior in the battle for equality than Chad Griffin. And Jim, welcome to San Francisco. We're happy to have you here in this grand hall, the People's Hall, as Mayor Lee refers to it. And as we have a wind down towards what I think will be an inevitable victory at the United States Supreme Court, I can't imagine a better place for Chad and Jim to be as we have a countdown to victory. Because in some ways, it all started here. Not necessarily the battle, because the battle had been waged by activists and people for decades, but it reached its breakout phase here. Building on the great work that was done by Mary Bonato in Massachusetts, we reached a breakout phase here in San Francisco under Mayor Newsom's courageous leadership and with a little bit of help from our office to start the battle here in California back in 2004. And I look fondly back on that day because it was a day not that dissimilar from today. Granted, it was February, but it was rainy, just like it is here today in San Francisco in June. But there were people starting to line up over Lincoln's birthday, President's Day holiday to celebrate their love for one another. And it took the nation by storm. And it finally put a human face on the battle that had been waged for equality for decades. And there were a great many people that said that it was too much, too soon, too fast. But as Mayor Newsom said at the time, the arc of history bends towards justice. And we're glad that here in San Francisco we were able to give it a little bit of a push and start what will ultimately culminate in victory at the Supreme Court. It's not that long ago, back in 2000, that Prop 22 here in California won by 60-40%. And here we are 15 years later, only 15 years later, where the majority of Americans support marriage equality. We have marriage equality in 37 states. And it is not a question of if, but only a question of when, where we are finally going to have marriage equality in the 50 states of the United States of America. And I am glad that San Francisco played a small role in securing that for couples here in California, and that we have been a key participant in the continuing battle to secure marriage equality for people across this country. And I would just say this to sort of echo my good friend Chad Griffin. The battle for equality is not over merely because we are going to secure marriage equality for LGBT couples and people across this country. There is still discrimination, and it's important that we ensure that we have comprehensive non-discrimination for people across this country embodied in federal law. And I hope that we can use the legal battle that we fought for marriage equality to be a little bit of a lesson about how it's important to stand up and fight. It's important to make sure that you not stand idly by, because what we have shown in the marriage equality battle is that you can use the power of the law to make a difference. You can use the power of activism to make a difference. You can energize people by using the law and activism to really make a difference in a very, very difficult environment. And I know that's something that Mayor Lee believes in, that our next speaker, Roberta Achtenberg, believes in, that my good friend Chad Griffin believes in, and I know that Jim believes in as well. And as do our supervisors, Scott Wiener and David Campos. So let the marriage equality fight be a lesson to all about the power of the law, the spirit of activism, motivating and activating the words of millions and millions of Americans across this country that to give measure to what they believe in, and that is equality. So thank you so much, Jim and Chad, for being here, and I look forward to celebrating our victory by the end of this month, but using that as a platform to really continue to move the ball forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Our next speaker, if you were to look up the definition of trailblazer, the first thing that should be there is Roberta Achtenberg. Roberta is someone that has so many titles, I could not possibly get through them all. Current and former, as so many of you know, Roberta is a former supervisor here in the city and county of San Francisco. Roberta is a trailblazer. She left that appointment in order to receive an appointment from President Clinton that I have to tell you how much it meant to me. And I had a chance to say this to Roberta earlier. I was 19 years old, closeted, and a very lonely kid in the Clinton White House. I had left Arkansas and gone to D.C., and my identity was deep, deep in the closet. And I will never forget the moment that the president announced his intention to nominate Roberta Achtenberg in her federal position and post at HUD. In fact, she became the first ever federal presidential appointment to be confirmed by the United States Senate and served very capably in that post. And I knew the name and the legend far before I had the privilege of getting to know the woman. She also co-founded NCLR, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, which is one of the greatest organizations in this country today fighting for equality. In fact, it's one of the organizations, were it not for Kate Kendall, Shannon Minter, and so many at NCLR, we would not have the cases before the court that are before the court today. They're responsible for winning multiple marriage victories and so many others. She also currently serves as a commissioner on the U.S. Commission for Civil Rights. So it is my pleasure to bring Roberta Achtenberg.
Thank you, young man. Just terrific. I'll be brief. This is such an emotional time, such a personal time, such a moving time for all of us. Finally, to have the sheer humanity of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people appreciated by all the people of the United States. It's just a wonderful time. And I want to say thank you to Jim for your courage. There have been hundreds, perhaps thousands, of individuals who have put themselves forward in the way Jim has to advocate for legal, social, full equality for LGBT people. So he stands on the shoulders of many, and with his help, it would appear as if we are going to reach a pinnacle in that struggle. So I want to say thank you to you, Jim. Supervisors Campos and Wiener, you are individual advocates for LGBT equality in your own right, but you are also part of a very important institution in this very important city. This Board of Supervisors has been committed to full LGBT equality since the early 70s. By my count, that's some 40 plus years, passing ordinance after ordinance, undertaking study after study that proves that the love that LGBT people have for their committed others is the equal of the love that any of us has for the person, that one special person that we love. So you are part of an important institution. Chad Griffin, you and your colleagues on the national stage who advocate our humanity every single day. You mentioned Kate and NCLR. We have Lambda Legal Defense. We have the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. These folks in these organizations stand up for us every single day, and they're standing up for us this time as well, projecting us forward toward the Supreme Court's final declaration of our legal equality. And then there's Mayor Lee. Mayor Lee, you as well. You and I go back a long way. We were civil rights lawyers together back in the day, actually at a time when civil rights didn't necessarily include advocacy for LGBT rights. Fast forward some 35 years, and now it embraces full equality of all people, including LGBT people. But Mr. Mayor, you are part of a great mayoral tradition in this city that has helped expand the meaning of equality. I want to make a special shout out to Mayor Agnos and to Mayor Newsom. Mayor Agnos, because he fought mightily almost 30 years ago for something that we quaintly called at the time domestic partner health benefits for city workers. We had to be so careful to circumscribe this so that it wouldn't yield the objection of people, this is going to cost too much, or how are we going to know whether this person is the other person's significant other? There were questions and questions and questions, and what they had at their root was essentially a question about whether or not my love for my partner was the equivalent of your love for your spouse. We answered that question in the affirmative in San Francisco almost 30 years ago. And carrying forward that tradition, great mayors like Mayor Willie Brown, great mayors like Mayor Gavin Newsom, great mayors now like Mayor Ed Lee. So this has been a mayoral tradition. One more point and I will close. Our humanity has been portrayed so effectively, not just in this marriage struggle, but in the struggles that came before it for family equality. I want to say a special thank you to our children, the children of lesbian mothers and gay fathers, who have fought this battle not of their own choosing, but they have fought it every single day. And through them and their sheer normalness, if there is such a word, they have shown to every American that we are people capable of great love and affection, that we are the human beings that we profess ourselves to be, and that we are good neighbors, good parents, good friends, community members. So thank you, a special thank you to our children for being the finest ambassadors that any community could possibly have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roberta, on reminding us of the great history of this incredible city. It's now my honor to bring another great leader, a true champion of social justice, Supervisor David Campos.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll be very brief, and I want to, again, welcome Jim and Chad to San Francisco. My husband and I, we've been married a year and a half, but we've been together almost 20 years. And Jim, I have to say that I've just really moved by what you have gone through, and really want to thank you for your courage. Thank you for making sure that my husband and I, if for some reason a tragedy happens, that we don't have to go through what you have gone through. So thank you. Thank you very much for your courage. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for bringing us here, for continuing to make sure that we lead the way in San Francisco. I'm very grateful to HRC that the fight for equality for the entirety of the community continues. I'm very grateful for that. I look forward to having full legal equality. But we also know, I think Harvey Milk, I didn't know Harvey, but I'm sure that Cleve would say, if Harvey Milk was here, he would say it's not just about legal equality, it's about other equality. And I'm going to leave with one thought, because to me, this is the one area where I feel a lot more work needs to be done. I was meeting a few days back with a coalition of transgender women who were talking about the plight of the transgender community all over the country, all over the world. And as a gay Latino man, I believe that we collectively, not only as the LGBT community, but as a community as a whole, we really need to focus more on what's happening to the transgender community, and especially to transgender women and men of color. And I know that with the leadership of the mayor, with the leadership of the Board of Supervisors on that issue, San Francisco will show the rest of the country how it's done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Supervisor, again reminding us of the distance we still have to go. for our most vulnerable of populations here in this country and in this city. Thank you. Now our last speaker, and I have to say the only title that I enjoy giving him more than supervisor is former HRC board member and city and county supervisor of San Francisco, Scott Wiener.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you for all of your work. And it was a real honor to spend a decade on the HRC National Board, wonderful organization. So I am not married. I'd probably be a very challenging spouse. But one of the great pleasures of this job is being able to marry people and participate in this amazing moment in their lives. And since marriage started again here, I think I performed probably 80 or 100 same-sex weddings, and it's just been inspiring. Last year when I married two gentlemen who met in 1970, they had been together 44 years. They met in the year that I was born. My aunt and her partner of 35 years were just married in Pennsylvania, of all places, just a few months ago. And so it has been so inspirational to see all of these decades and decades of fight and struggle in this community really move forward in such a magical way. And I know we're going to have a great victory later this month, and we're going to celebrate it. And then we're going to move forward to all of the other needs of this community. And there's a lot of work to do in Washington, but locally we are continuing to lead the way here. We are doing cutting-edge work around the really unmet needs of our LGBT seniors, a population that is growing and that we haven't really done enough to meet their unique needs. We are going to be the first city in the United States to eliminate new HIV infections through our innovative Getting to Zero program. And we are going to continue to be a refuge for our LGBT youth who come here from all over the country and all over the world, and we are going to make sure that they have housing and education and employment opportunities and a chance to succeed and be part of this city, just like so many generations of us before them. And so our work is cut out for us, but for now, we're going to look forward to, and I know, celebrate this wonderful victory. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here, and may this be our best pride yet. Thank you all.